Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this late 2009 BMW X5, which is known as the E70 in the BMW world. I did a video a while ago with the old shape E53 X5, which is a car that I've always loved, and I thought it was about time that I did this Mark II model. I've been waiting to do a video with the second generation X5 for some time, but I've just been waiting for the right model to come along. And then a couple of days ago I was offered this model, so I thought, why not? This generation X5 has been around since 2007, and it ran until 2013. When it was first released, I didn't really like the styling. I wasn't a fan of it. I thought BMW had made a mistake actually, which is often the case with BMWs. I thought the E53 X5 was a really nice design. I thought it was a really handsome car. But with this second generation, I thought it looked like a first generation that had been parked next to a bonfire. It all just sort of melted and gone a little bit flabby around the edges. But now, more than a decade later, this design's actually grown on me. When compared to more modern SUVs, this E70 generation actually looks quite understated. Now this was an important car for BMW to get right, because the E53 was such a runaway success. All BMW had to do was stick to the same winning formula, and they have. In fact, they've gone one better than that. Not only have they stuck to that winning formula, but they've just made everything 20% better. So all the engines are 20% more efficient. There's 20% more space than the first generation X5. Some models even came with 20% more seats. That's right, you could buy an X5 as a 7-seater for the first time. In fact, for the first time in BMW's history, they sold a 7-seat vehicle. This meant the new X5 was a very good family car, because it's just so practical. The boot is bigger than the previous model, although it's still not quite as big as the boot on a Range Rover or an Audi Q7. Another good feature of the X5 was that it had a split folding tailgate like a Range Rover, which is a great feature. The seats fold flat, there's plenty of room in the back, plenty of legroom, plenty of headroom. Alright, I mean the third row of seats aren't the most practical or spacious, but they're alright for kids. Sat here in the driver's seat is excellent, visibility is superb, the driving position is unparalleled, and although you sit up high, you never feel disconnected, you feel a part of it. It's a typical BMW really, it's a proper driver's car, even a gargantuan like this. I'm sure you're all familiar with the history of the X5, but for those of you at the back who aren't so familiar, allow me to just very briefly explain. Well, the BMW X5 was the first genuinely sporty SUV. It's wholly responsible for that subgenre that's so popular today. That first generation X5 really did drive well on road. So much so it left all the other SUVs in its wake. All the other SUVs or four-wheel drives at the time sat like a gramophone in an Apple store. They were just so hopelessly outdated and antiquated. Every other SUV, barring the X5, handled like a truck. Clumsy, unsophisticated, cumbersome. The X5 really did teach everyone else a lesson, and everybody else had to quickly catch up. And catch up they did. By 2007, when this second generation X5 was released, they had some stiff competition. The Porsche Cayenne had been invented, as had the Audi Q7, as had the Range Rover Sport. But I think this E70 X5 still holds the crown. They're just so good to drive on road. But let's not talk about off-road just yet, because off-road they're absolutely useless. But on-road, they're superb. There's barely any body roll, the steering's communicative, it just feels stiff and sporty and precise, it's not wallowy like a walrus. The downside to that stiff body means that the ride is firmer. Bear with me a second, I've got a Peugeot that thinks he's having this X5M. I don't think so, Peugeot man. It's not jarring or completely uncomfortable, but it's just nowhere near as comfortable as a Range Rover. There were lots of engine choices available too, starting off with two 6-cylinders, a 6-cylinder diesel and a 6-cylinder petrol. Now I've had both over the years, and the 6-cylinder petrol is very good. It's surprisingly frugal on a motorway run, but a little bit thirsty around town. Performance is pretty good, sounds good too. But most people here in Europe bought the 3-litre diesel. Now that produced about 235 horsepower, and it was quite an economical car. You'd get 27-28 miles per gallon around town, 37-38 miles per gallon on a motorway run. So quite cheap to live with for a big 7-seat SUV anyway. They also managed to get the emissions down on the 3-litre diesel, which meant for an 08 model you would only pay £330 a year in road tax here in the UK rather than £550 like all the rest, which was quite a selling point at the time. They also made a 3-litre SD with twin turbos if you wanted that little bit more oomph. They also offered it with a few V8 petrols, which is perfect if you don't want your children to inherit a load of your wealth. The V8s were only really bought by low league footballers. But in 2009, if you were a Premier League footballer and you wanted a BMW X5 for your orange bride with a bad attitude, you could have bought an X5M, which is the car I'm in today. This uses a 4.4 litre twin-turbo V8, which produces 555 brake horsepower. I just overtake a Honda Jazz here. This thing is rapid. Now, back in 2009, when this X5M was released, it went head-to-head with the ML63, the Porsche KNS, and this beat them all. It's unbelievable, really. Even now, a decade later, this thing would keep up with an SVR Range Rover Sport. Now, the X5M is quite a rare car. So rare, in fact, that I've never had one before. The X5M should, of course, been called the MX5, but it couldn't because of Mazda. So instead, it's known as the X5M, which sounds like something Yoda's come up with, doesn't it? This X5M is capable of 0 to 60 in just over 4 seconds. It is properly quick, even by 2020 standards. I've got one eye on my head-up display here, keeping an eye on my speed, because this is the stretch of road that I recently got a speeding ticket on. And can you believe, in all the quick cars I've been in recently, I got a speeding ticket on this stretch of road in a Land Rover Defender. And not even the new one, the old one that I borrowed from my pal. 37 miles per hour in a 30 zone, which now means that next Tuesday I've got to spend the afternoon doing some online speed awareness course. Anyway, where were we? So yeah, the X5M is completely ridiculous, silly, superfluous, all of those words. It's totally unnecessary. But as with a lot of things in life, it's the things that are completely unnecessary which are the most fun, aren't they? So this is a super fast, super 4x4, which isn't super at being an off-roader. It's actually quite bad off-road. To deal with all this power, they've given the X5M even wider, even chunkier, even sportier, harder tyres, which means it's totally flummoxed by a dirt path. So if I press the magic M button on the steering wheel and put my foot down, this thing is relentless. That's seriously quick. There's not much theatre with it. You don't realise how quick you're going or how fast you're going until you look at your head-up display and realise, yeah, perhaps if they saw me doing that speed, I wouldn't be allowed in that Zoom meeting, would I? One thing I love about the X5M is just how subtle it is. There are hardly any clues which give away the fact that this, at the time, was the most powerful SUV money could buy. You just get a very small M badge on the boot, which, to be fair, looks like something that I could have bought off eBay and stuck on myself. And that's pretty much it. And I like that. It's not shouty or pretentious. It just has this quiet confidence about it. There's something quite knowing about the X5M that I like. The only real giveaway are the quad exhausts, which again aren't that shouty. Most powerful SUVs are quite loutish and shouty. There's something very Stella Artois about them, but not the X5M. Most people would look at this and assume that it's 8 grand's worth of 100,000 mile diesel, when really it's a near 20 grand, 550 horsepower brute. The way this handles is superb. You would think that you're in a sporty saloon car, not a big lofty SUV. It's incredible. We should now get back to the standard X5 review, because I'm not for 1 second suggesting you buy an X5M, because that's just ridiculous, isn't it? Who in their right mind would buy an X5M? Apart from me. Seriously, in the real world, you're better off with the diesel. Every time I walk towards a BMW X5 ready to get in it, I think, God, the ride's going to be firm, the steering's going to be heavy. So because I've built that into my mind before I get in, when you actually drive it, you realise it's not that bad at all. The steering's not too heavy, and the ride isn't too firm. It's not as easy as, say, a Range Rover, but it's not bad. It's just until you've driven one of these cars, you won't believe how nimble and agile it can feel. And the steering's well weighted. It's very easy to place. The brakes are very good too. I mean, they'd have to be, wouldn't they? Inside the E70 is lovely. Everything's quite Germanic. It's sensible and sober. Everything's laid out well. Everything's organised. Okay, it might not be the most exciting thing to look at, but you get the sense that the quality's there, because every single button and switch you touch or press, it feels well engineered. Everything has a satisfying click to it. Nothing feels cheap or flimsy. You get the big screen sat-nav here, which is a nice option. I've got heated front seats. I've got a head-up display, which is perfect. You've got 2 cup holders down here, plus some more storage. Weirdly though, you don't get a glove box. You get a top storage, I suppose, glove box area, but you don't get a traditional glove box underneath. You do get plenty of charging points and plenty of USB points and auxiliary points, so that's quite good. And I know this era of iDrive system always gets slated, but I've always found it quite easy to operate. I also like the gear lever too, it's very intuitive. And considering this car's 10 years old now with 57,000 miles on the clock, there's hardly any wear on anything. You can pick up early 2007 BMW X5s from around £5,000. You're going to have to spend between 7 and 8 to get a decent one. If you're in the market for an X5M, then they are as rare as hen's teeth. If you've got £6,000 or £7,000 to spend, then you definitely want to go for a 3 litre diesel, because the running costs won't crucify you. And as family cars go, I think they're great. Plenty of room in the back for the kids, plenty of room in the boot for the mother-in-law, and then the driver can enjoy themselves on country roads like this. It is a win-win. There are a couple of things to consider though. Now, running costs won't be cheap, but that is true of every car of this size and style. I mean, naturally, because these cars were more than £50,000 new, you can't possibly expect to get one for a tenth of that and not have expensive running costs. Tyres, for example, will cost you £200 a corner for a decent brand, and you want to have a decent brand on your X5. Because of its size and weight, they will munch through rubber, so it's a little bit short-sighted to get an inferior brand, because you'll end up replacing them twice as quickly, whereas a proper brand should last you a little bit longer. Fuel-wise, as I mentioned earlier, the 3 litre diesels are quite economical, but what I mean by that is they're economical for this kind of car. They're not economical if you're coming out of a diesel Megane. Some of the V8s or the X5M will return you 15 mpg at best, which isn't so great. That's one thing I've noticed about the X5M actually. This might surprise you, but it isn't what you'd call economical. Insurance is something else you need to think about, because when these cars were new, they were quite expensive to insure. Now they're getting on a bit. If you've got a few years no claims behind you, it shouldn't be too bad, but it is something that you need to check out first. Now, I suppose that brings us on to reliability, doesn't it? Well, I've had lots of these cars and I've never really had any major issues. Touch wood. You might have things like a turbo fail, or the EGR valves need to be replaced, that kind of thing. But that's true of every other car too, so I wouldn't let that put you off necessarily. But what I would advise you to do, the same as what I suggest on Range Rover videos as well, is keep a few £1,000s back for a rainy day. Because if something goes wrong on this car, it might run into, 800, 900 or £1,000. So keep some money aside in a separate account for any possible repairs and you should be all right. Another thing to mention, pre-facelift X5s, before they launched the LCI version in 2010, pre-facelifts had a 6-speed automatic gearbox. Now they do need to be serviced at 80,000 miles or 90,000 miles. That will cost you around £200 to get that serviced. That's crucial because if you don't service it, it will probably fail, and then you're staring down the barrel of a £2,500 bill. Later facelifted X5s got the improved 8-speed ZF gearbox, which is better, but I would still recommend you service it. But all in all, if you buy a good one that's been well maintained and you keep up with that maintenance, they're not unreliable cars. I know I'm going to be inundated with comments. Huh, money pit. Ha! Ha! Yes, alright, fine. Or BMW, that stands for break my wallet, man. Well, no, it doesn't stand for that, does it? But I know I'm going to get comments from that. And if that is a concern of yours, then buy a Toyota Corolla. Really, you shouldn't be looking at this kind of stuff if you're panicking about reliability. You've got to accept or expect, if you buy a 10-year-old luxury car that once cost nearly £100,000, it will throw up the odd big bill every now and then. And if that worries you, then you really need to go and buy a Corolla, because you can't have it all ways. You can't buy a £60,000 car for £6,000 and not expect to spend £600 on something when it breaks. I think if you're a petrol head and a realist and you're looking for a family car, then the E70 X5 is a great idea. But, and I'm not being rude now, if you're completely skint, don't buy one. This isn't the kind of car that you can buy and then not bother servicing for 3 years and hope that nothing goes wrong, because it might do. So if that is your intention, to buy something and just completely neglect it and trash it, then go and buy a Zafira or a Renault Scenic or something. Well, I think that pretty much sums up the BMW X5 E70. So thanks once again for watching. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you. Oh, don't forget to comment below, by the way, and tell me, what an idiot. What a money pit. Cheers, guys. I'll see you next time.